Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Board Games Hitting My Table. So in this series I take a look at all of the board games that I've been playing over the last couple of weeks. This episode covering the second half of February 2023. Now before I get started on the games, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer when it comes to purchasing board games here in the UK. And if you use my link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. But let's get cracking with Mosaic. So Mosaic is a game I've added to my collection very recently. Gave this a very positive review. And I played a rematch, a two-player game with somebody. We had a very close game the first time. I think there was only a point or two in it. In this most recent game, that was not the case because it was an absolute bloodbath. I got massacred in this one. I pretty much lost every metric of the game. But despite that, I had a great time. And I think a big part of that was because how quickly the game came to a conclusion. Because the first time I played this, and after my review, I said that one of the biggest issues with it is the fact that the game can run a little bit long due to the randomization of these cards that are shuffled into the deck, which are essentially your endgame trigger. Now what I did this time is that I did a bit of a house rule by making sure that those cards were higher up in those decks, meaning that the game was inevitably going to be shorter. And that made every decision seem that much more meaningful and added more to that kind of action economy where you don't want to be wasting anything. Yeah, this one I went so wrong for me because there are several kind of public objectives available to you during each game. I think there's 9 a game, and I think I lost 7 out of the 9 of them, which is not a good start at all. So yeah, it kind of started off bad and it ended up getting worse. But again, if I still enjoyed the game after that experience, it goes to show that the game itself is good. And yeah, it's definitely going to hit the table some more. And I'm looking forward to trying it at some different player counts. So that is Mosaic. Got some old classics and favourites back to the table with the Castles of Burgundy. So a two-player game in this one I played again. Very close game. Again, I think there was fewer than 5 points between us. I think I just squeezed the win here by specialising in the farms. I think the last round I managed to get like a 3 or 4 section completed of the one particular type of animal, which, if you know this game, it gives you a lot of points, and that kind of section filling in a section bonus as well. But yeah, we went very different paths here, and yeah, it's just such an absolute classic game. You know, I've always rated this highly, but the fact that you keep on playing it after, in and between playing other games, and it still holds its own. It's been on my top, 50 or even top 30 rankings for many years, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. It's such a charming game, so much fun, and one of the best kind of dice kind of manipulation games out there. Just absolutely brilliant. That is the Castles of Burgundy. We'll go on to a couple of fillers here now. So this is Ka-Ching. Ka-Ching, not a very popular game, and one that's I think over 20 years old now. This is a really cool drafting game, very mathematic in the way it works, or mathematical. So basically what you're trying to do is you're drafting from these pillars of cards, and if you get the same coloured cards, you can multiply them with each other. It has a very tight economy to it, as you have to balance your funds very carefully because you can quickly run out of money. And you want to be making sure you always have money, because if you don't and your opponent does, they're probably going to have a much better choice of getting the cards they want and can leave you out of pocket. Really clever, extremely tense, but a great two-player game, and fiercely underrated. So if you can get a copy of this one, I would highly recommend it if you like your tense two-player games and that drafting and kind of that Jeopardy feeling where if you do something, your opponent is going to get something as well. That's a really great game. That is Ka-Ching. I played more Six Nimmt. I'll move quickly on from that one because I talk about Six Nimmt all the time. I've been getting some more Lock back to the table. So Lock, another game that came out last year, a self-published game, I believe. But this is a lovely little party game. This is kind of a family favourite of mine. If I have my brother and my parents together, we'll probably give this one a go. A nice little word association game. You can play cooperatively or competitively. I always play it cooperatively because it just takes the edge off, and it means you can keep trying to beat your score. So much fun, very versatile, and I like it a lot. So still going strong. That is Lock. Also played some Seven Wonders Duel. Now this was a very interesting game I had here because I pretty much mopped up all of the resource tokens or cards in the first round, giving me all the leverage when it came to buying whatever I wanted. My opponent didn't, but they did go very strong for those science cards. And I think by the end of the first round, they had 4 out of the 6 science cards that they needed. meaning that although I had a great infrastructure in the in the second and third phase of the game, I had to be very cautious about the opportunities I left to my opponent. And I was so lucky the fact that 2 of the science cards, or in fact the final science card that they needed, they were both on display at the same time, meaning that I could just about manipulate the game state so that my opponent had no money by the time those cards came up, and I could gobble them both up before they got the chance to get them. And once that happened, it was pretty much game over, because they didn't have the infrastructure to support themselves. But so yeah, I love the different kind of ways you can score in this game. You always have to be aware. It's so much kind of, again, opportunity cost. If you do something, you are giving up something else, and your opponent is doing the same. So you have to be quite smart about the opportunities you're leaving to your opponents, and always have that backup thinking. If it doesn't end on a sudden death either through science or military, then you need to have those points in your back pocket as well in order to win. So yeah, this is a phenomenal 2-player game, almost perfect. That is 7 Wonders Duel. I played a 2-player game of Cascadia. So Cascadia, very popular family weight tile placement game, and has that dual drafting system. As you're drafting the tile with a token, you're placing the tokens on the tiles to get kind of a spatial puzzle bonuses here. It's a lovely game. One of my only nitpicks of it, and this nitpick is getting bigger the more I play it, is I actually find it quite frustrating replenishing the 4 tiles and tokens each draft, because the drafts take a microsecond, and it all seems like you're always replenishing those 4. That is becoming a little bit tedious for me. I do like the game a lot. This has, I think it's even broken into my top 100 at one point. I probably still put it at about a 7, but I have to say it probably is dropping a little bit for me. I'm not quite getting the highs as I was from it, and it might be time for me to move on from Cascadia, despite objectively this being a great game. I just think I've played all the different setups, I've seen what it has to offer, and sometimes that's more than enough. It's definitely has some legs in it and some mileage, but yeah, I think it's time to wave goodbye to Cascadia. I played a 2-player game of First Class. So First Class is actually the card game version, a drafting version of Russian Railroads. Now this game is a bit lighter. There's quite a bit edited out of the original Russian Railroads, but it does have the same feel to it. And there's some kind of different modules and things you can play with. In this most recent game I played with, there's modules to make the railway track double the amount of points. And there's also ones where you get like the passengers and luggage items, which can give you points in different, or money in different ways as well. This game has one of the coolest money mechanisms that I've seen, where when you take coins, you are always filling up from your lowest to highest on your player board here. And the more coins you have, and the furthest along you have them, the more powerful actions you can get by spending them. It is so, so clever. And one of the coolest things about this game is how quick it is, because I think we played a 2-player game in about 30 minutes. And considering this game does have quite a lot of weight to it, it has plenty of meaningful decisions, is quite impressive indeed. I think maybe even the setup takes, probably 30% of the actual game length. So although I love this game, and I really do mean that, this is like an 8 out of 10 for me. It is so similar to Russian Railroads, which is one of my favourite games ever. That's like a 9 out of 10 for me. I'm not sure if there's room for both in my collection. So I think maybe I might have to be a bit aggressive and cull this one, simply because, or for that reason, I don't need 2 very similar games. And I think this one can probably fetch a fair price on the second-hand market. So we shall see. If I get a good price for it, I might pass with it. But if not, I'm more than happy to keep it, because it is such a fantastic game anyway. But that is a First Class. Also played a rather quick 2-player game of Acropolis. Acropolis, another game that hits my table very frequently. You guys have heard me talk kind of ad nauseum about it. But yeah, we played a 2-player game with only the 2-player tiles in it. There are kind of variants where you can play with loads of tiles or all the tiles in the game. I think that actually takes some of the magic away. With a 2-player game being so tight and having those multipliers be so scarce, it makes the game feel a bit more, a bit more has a bit more tactics into the drafting of the tiles in the first place. Because if you miss it now, you're probably going to miss it later as well. And if you let one person get all of the multiplier tiles, that's a lot of points you're giving away. But yeah, this is a lovely kind of 3D tile laying game, almost no rules in it, apart from the spatial puzzle rules. And to be honest, I'm quite comparing this to Cascadia, there is a lot of similarities between the two. In fact, by laying things on top of the other things, but I do prefer Acropolis. So this might be almost like a direct replacement, really. Acropolis replacing Cascadia. But yeah, this one is it's almost like an evergreen for me at this point. So it'll be interesting to see if I feel that way, in a year or two. But at the moment, still love it. Nothing bad to say about Acropolis. Also played a 4-player game, I believe, of Quo Vadis. So Quo Vadis is a much older Reiner Knizia negotiation game as you're trying to navigate your way up this Senate track here. And you can only move up by getting votes from either neutral pieces or the or other players. And I say neutral pieces because there is going to be a reprint of this game. I think it's already been on Kickstarter and been successful, called Quo Vadis. And what I've done, and what I'll probably continue to do, is that when I don't have that full 5-player arrangement of players, I will use that neutral rule which has been added into the new version of the game. It's very easy to add into this one because the board state is exactly the same. So yeah, I think this game is so much fun. It really is, it's an overused word, but it is unique. And I think even when we finished the game of this one, it was a matter of all discussing how quirky and how different this game feels to anything else out there on the market. But I love this one. I was kind of taking a very slow approach here, trying to give my votes to the other players, get their trust, get some money for doing so, and hopefully squeezing in to the Senate at the end, because if you don't get your piece to the Senate, you're not even viable for scoring. And yeah, I think towards the end of the game, people kind of started to realise that I was probably in a strong position for points. So then I just had to make a kind of run for it and try to end it just as I had enough. But yeah, this is so much fun. It's just a shame that it's not a terribly versatile game, because you do really need 4 or 5 players to get the full kind of amount of enjoyment from it. But at the moment, loving it. That is Quo Vadis. Staying on Reiner Knizia, we played a 4-player game of high score. Very simple dice rolling game, just rolling the dice, trying to get the highest score in a bunch of different mini games. Almost all luck, but still some push your luck as well. And I like it. It's certainly charming, and one that you can play with anybody. And onto the last physical copies here. I've got so we played a 3-player game of Sperium. So I really am itching to do a full review of this one, because how this game is not still in the zeitgeist is beyond me, because it's got worker placement in it, which is always a popular mechanism. And it also has some really cool, unique things about placing your workers in between these cards. And the more the workers go there, the more expensive it becomes to use the cards, because the price is increased for every meeple surrounding it. However, there is an alternative choice you can make by removing the meeples, and you get money equal to the amount of other people surrounding those cards. And what happens is it becomes a bit of a game of chicken, really, where people start pulling things off, getting more money, until they'll become this turning point where somebody will buy the card. And you're building these buildings, which will give you engine building benefits. Using these player powers. It's just an absolute great game. You can get played in about an hour. And yeah, I really recommend this one if you like your kind of Euro style worker placement games. And yeah, really can't recommend it enough. And there's just a couple more games that I don't have the physical copy of here. The first of which is Drop It. So Drop It is always a go-to game for me when I'm at my parents' house. Nice dexterity game. It's actually pretty, it's quite meticulous in the way you have to do things as you're dropping these kind of different shapes into this vertical kind of tower, and trying not to touch the same colour or the same shape. It's actually a lot of fun and way better than it should be. And we also played a 4-player game of Black Fleet, a very family-friendly, chaotic pirate game as you're doing a bit of pick up and deliver, and also battling the other players to get new get new powers and things as well as the game goes on. But that's it, really. That's all the games that I've been playing. I've definitely had a good balance here of new games, old games, small games and big games, and it's always nice to play some old favourites as well, such as the Castles of Burgundy. Sperium has been a nice one to play recently, and even kind of getting new knowledge in terms of what I'm feeling and what might be removed from the collection soon, such as Cascadia and maybe even First Class, because again it is so similar to Russian Railroads. But that's the end of the video, really. If you have enjoyed it, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to my channel and check out my other content too. But for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye bye.